and welcome to Confetti All Around. I am Cynthia Perez, your host. This is sponsored by Rooted in Reflection, and we are so happy today to introduce Rosa Shetty, a social worker, a mom, and the host of Inner Healing Paths podcast. Thank you, Rosa, so much for being here with me today. I am really excited to ask you some questions to really turn the tables and have you as our guest today. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, it is an honor and a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. Now, Rosa, I've been following you on Instagram first, Rosa Shetty and Inner Healing Path podcast. I found it because I was so into inner child work a few years ago, and I found you. And first of all, I really liked your softness. That was something that really caught my eye, and really like the delicate nature in which you approached inner child healing. Would you say that that is a modality that you've been practicing more with your work?
Yeah, so for me, I've been the trauma therapist for many, many years. I've been in the field specifically with trauma since 2007. And the inner child work has always been synonymous with trauma healing work. For folks familiar with EMDR therapy or sensory motor therapy, parts work, or even a very older therapy, ego states work, that, those therapeutic approaches naturally elicit a connection with your inner child. So throughout my work with my clients over the years, that's what we do, So I like to say that it is very, especially for folks with childhood trauma, physical abuse, sexual abuse, abandonment, neglect, doing inner child work really is working on your trauma, which is why it can be very triggering also, right, to do that work. But inner child work in general it's not only for those that have trauma, right? Inner child work is for anyone that really wants to connect with that part within themselves. But for me, my approach, or the lens from which I work with inner child healing, or that approach, is from the perspective of trauma work or trauma-focused therapy.
Beautiful. And I noticed in your work, just in your approach, I feel like I'm kind of like swept by your softness, but also like your firm resolve. I wanted to ask you, do you do reparenting in your own inner child, like in your personal life? And tell me a little bit about how reparenting did come into your life if you do this work.
Oh, so in my personal life, you mean?
Yeah.
Just in my
because
own healing
it shows in you, because
yeah,
in therapy we could say, CBT, DBT, but your presence, it shows that you really honor your inner child by the way you show up. So I kind of want to ask you, how did reparenting your inner child come into your life? Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. I would have to go back to just my healing journey in general. Like many therapists, social workers, people in this field, in the mental health field, I went into it because of my own difficulties, my own wounding, my own trauma. And being very young and in college, it just felt natural to go into this field because I had a very intimate understanding of what it was to go through, all these difficulties. So I would have to say it stems from all the way back to that. But it wasn't until I had this big breakup, a big end to a relationship. And I say big because it was a very long relationship. It started when I was very, very young. And when that relationship ended, I realized that by then I was a therapist and I had, had been an adult for a while. So when that ended, I had, thank God, I had some insight in terms of how numbing this relationship really was, and how I had almost bypassed my own healing through the relationship and by becoming a therapist. So me going into psychology and social work and then having this relationship, I didn't really I bypassed, numbed, the things from my childhood, the things that I needed to work through. So when this ended, I didn't have that. I didn't have that. By then, I had been in the field for a few years, working with very intense cases, working in a trauma center, and I was burned out. So everything happened at once. So I had no other choice but to look within and to start healing. And by that, I mean, literally, I started doing yoga. I started eating better. I started working out. I started just taking care of my body in general. I began reading tons of books on self-help and development and, things that really nourished my soul. I stopped going to the church that I was going to because I realized, they're very, very it wasn't a healthy, it was a very toxic environment for me because of the judgment and, all the things that religion, not all, but, that religion can sometimes impact a person, right? And so I left that organization or that group and just started following my own healing. And through that process, I realized that what I needed and how to nourish myself. And now since that happened, I think it's been 11 years that I've been on this journey of reconnecting with myself, reconnecting with, and integrating, I should say, integrating the parts within me that were lost because of trauma, because of this toxic relationship, because of being burned out as a therapist. When I was very, very young, little by little, I've been reintegrating that and making more space for that. And then, so when I say reintegrating and taking care of myself, that's really what I mean by reparenting, right? Taking care and being intentional about it, taking care of the younger parts within me, connecting, acknowledging, validating these parts, and being intentional to nourish and nurture these parts, especially the younger parts, the parts that feel very, very young, or my inner baby or my inner 5-year-old, being able to nourish that. And that has been my reparenting. And I do want to emphasize that it is a journey. And even though I had been in the field of trauma for very young, there's one thing that happens where it's, you understand it in your mind, in your head, cognitively, but it's very, very different to really get it with your heart, with your spirit, with your body. And when I started my healing journey, my own personal healing journey, I had a cognitive understanding, right? I had the education, I had the work experience, but it was not integrated within myself. So it's been a journey. And I think for me, I don't see this journey necessarily ending. I feel like I'm going to forever be nourishing and reparenting these younger parts within me, because they don't go away, right? Parts are here to stay, but we can have a different relationship with these parts so they can actually help us in our day-to-day and in our life and not get in the way of living our best life or the best version that we can for ourselves. So, so for me, reparenting I know it's going to be a lifelong journey, and it's going to look very different at different points in my life, but I'm for it. I'm all for it. And
I love to hear you talk about it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. You explained reparenting, which is really the process of giving that little child, whatever child shows up, whatever they need at the moment, whether they show up as 5 or a 12-year-old that's jealous or a 20-year-old that's overwhelmed. You take the moment, the pause to give them what they need, not necessarily what we got, because that might be shame, but to give them what they genuinely need to show up as themselves. But I love you. Okay, first of all, thank you so much for being honest about, hey, I'm a therapist, and yet this is what works for me because I bypassed a lot of my own childhood. It's not our fault as therapists that we grew up in a childhood that might have had, complex trauma or, some scary moments. It's not our fault. And yet here we are as healers, as clinicians in this field. And then we might have shame to be like, oh, I went through a breakup. I should be beyond this. I should know how to get myself past this. This is what I do. I hold space for people. But I love that you were so honest, because this is a lot of us. I don't know any clinicians that if they were like, no, everything's great all the time, then I think that there's a lack of awareness. So I just want to thank you from my corazon, because when we can show up authentically with each other and just say, yeah, there was this breakup and look how far I've come from that. People, I think, feel attracted to that vulnerability. But in your story, I also love that you were kind of specific about what you did to reparent yourself. And that is what I saw is you made your environment safe for your inner child. You said you stopped going to some places where you felt shame. You started doing yoga. You gave them rest. You really tapped into what are you feeling? And I really love that, because our environment is really a place where our inner child's like, is this safe? Or are you going to do that thing you do again, where you say that we're going to have joy, and then the minute someone gives you a judgment, you take it away. And it sounds like you really were like, the way I picture it, Rosa, let me know I feel like when I
Yeah.
meditate with my inner child, I could be in this chair. You just see me in my chair with my eyes closed, but I'm having a conversation, and we are all huddled together, and we're like, what do you need? Or maybe we're hugging, and it's like, what are you feeling? How are you feeling and safe? And how can I move you through this? And when I come out of it, sometimes I'm like, no, that was nothing. I'm like profoundly changed. And I know it's because I am like really changing from the inside. I'm like rewiring it, but I'm pushing that little girl to be like, show up. Do you
Yeah.
see that interaction going like that? How does it look like for you?
Yeah, I think again, it's been a process, and it's been a long journey for myself. Looking back and now that we're talking about it, I think it really that can for me. And I forgot to mention this earlier, but I also just started my own therapy at that point, my own trauma therapy. I think that's when I started really connecting with this idea of my inner girl, that little girl within me. And I still remember my therapist that told me immediately, as I was sharing my situation and why I was there, immediately she was like, there's a little girl within you. And she validated, I was not talking about that. Right. And then from that moment, it's like, interesting that sometimes we are so good at noticing everyone else, but we don't acknowledge and notice that within ourselves. And I never thought of seeing that specific situation from the perspective of inner child. So I think that really was the catalyst, and that opened the door for me, for my own healing journey, to connect with my inner child. And I love to do meditations, kind of like what you just described. You close your eyes and you sit for a minute, and you connect and you visualize, and you have these vivid visualizations or imagery of a little one within you. So I love that. It was easier before I became a mom. For me, I used to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I used to have these challenges with my sister, just between her and I, where we would call each other every day, and we'd do it for like a month. And at around 9 o'clock or so, we're like, okay, let's do our inner child meditation to keep us accountable. But I think in the last few years since becoming a mom, I've been very intentional about connecting with my inner child through the activities that I do for my baby. So I have a toddler, and I realized that everything that I want her to experience now, I find so much joy. And I've been finding myself going back and asking my mom about what was it like, when I was 2, when I was 3, what was going on at that time? Because I love this stage. Like I just love being it's hard. Don't get me wrong. It's very hard, but I'm loving it in a way that feels very nourishing to a very young part within me. So that's been, a curiosity that I've explored. And as I'm, with my little one, whether we're doing art or whether I'm taking her to Disneyland or, a museum, or just even out on a walk, just looking at flowers, the way she sees a flower and how excited she is to look at the pink flowers and purple flowers, and just that she wants to go to a specific house because she knows they have pink flowers there. And that joy for these little things, I'm kind of enjoying it through her, like reliving some of these things through her. And in a way, I feel like I'm reparenting these parts within me as well. So I think a lot of my, at this point in my life, because, there's a lot happening with the little one, I try to be intentional about the things that I do with her and, make that be also nourishing for me in a different way than just as a
I love
mom, but
that.
also as, my little one within. Yeah.
Yeah, and I see it like as on paper, it's a coping skill. Like, hey, you have to be a mom anyway, might as well get into it, have fun. But on the deeper
Yeah.
level, you're taking this opportunity, like you do have to go to the park anyway. How can I look at it through the lens of my child, first of all, but also, wait a minute, I have a child within me. Why don't I let them put the glasses on, them lead the day?
Yeah.
I agree. I have found myself like really arguing contentious when it came to play with my kids, especially at the toddler age. And once I could lean into it and be like, well, what do you want? Do you want to play Little Sin? And once I would let her meet my kids, oh my gosh, fascinada. And I noticed it in the pandemic. We didn't have a lot of options to take the kids out. So I got some free fairy garden stuff. And I remember one day I was like, I'm going to make a little spot with a fairy garden. And I did my little fairy garden stuff, but my kids were like 2 and 3. So when they got home and they saw my fairy garden, what did they want to do but like play in it? And I got so upset. I was like, that's my fairy garden. I realized my inner child was like, hey, like you messed up my plate. And once I could soothe that little girl and be like, they want to play with you. Let's see how they could do their fairy garden. She was like, oh, okay. But it took me like kind of being like, hey, I get it. And these are these playmates you can have. It changed so much. And I think that is like little ways of integrating, stopping myself from, because I wanted to be like, and I probably did be like, why did you mess up my fairy garden? But later handling that little girl and saying, I get it. Like, and then letting her be with my sons. And then I started noticing that it would happen again. Like, I love that you said you noticed the flowers. I felt like, what is going on within me, Rosa? I would walk outside the door to take my kids on a walk and the flowers seemed brighter. It's like I was really stepping into my childhood awe as well. And it's really just being where they're at. And I think we're talking about like being present with our children and really like sharing the joy with them. And I was actually going to ask you, how have you noticed this impact on your relationship with your daughter, your connection, since you really have been intentional with your inner child and her?
Yeah. So, for me, I feel that with by the more intentional I am and staying present has been also very challenging for me. I'm just going to be honest. So when I become intentional about, what we're doing in that moment and I connect with her joy and through that, try to find that place within myself, it helps me to be more present in that moment. Because, for example, if we're going on a walk and a lot of times we go on walks because I'm trying to get her tired so she can go to sleep and early enough, right? So I'm trying to get through the walk because I'm trying to make it back, in time to feed her and then put her to sleep. If I can get really caught up in that and I just want to keep on walking where she wants to just stop and go and look at this and look, and so I've noticed that by being able to remind myself, and it's a challenge, is way easier said than done. But when I can do that, on most times, it actually helps me to be more mindful, more present, to really appreciate her. And I feel like when we can do that as parents, we're able to see what a gift our kids are for our healing. I mean, if you think about all the heal, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but just since I've had her, how it has expanded my healing parts within me that I thought I had already worked through, things and situations from my past that I thought I did that in therapy 10 years ago or 5 years ago. I'm good, right? Then I had her 3 years ago and it was like, what is happening? I thought I had worked through this, but I'm having this trigger and and so when we're able to stay present with our children and intentional enough with our own healing, I think we can really see what a gift they are for us, right. And it's just, I feel that I'm just so grateful in that sense to her, and to, even though that's not her role, right, that's not her, that's not
Right.
why she came to this world.
But you love her enough to.
But inevitably, it happens, right. I want to be a better person, a better mom, a better partner, and being a better mom right now is because she's so little, and is my priority. So if she's giving me this opportunity, I see it, to heal and to reflect back, almost like a mirror, because she really does reflect back the things that I still need to work through. And it happens every day. I mean, Cynthia, as a mom of little ones, I'm sure you know, is like every day there's, the guilt because maybe I'm getting home too late, or I'm working too much, or I didn't play enough with her, and it's like, where is this coming from? Right. I'm a great mom. I do the best that I can, so anyway, so it's a constant reminder, a constant resetting of intentions and attention. But yeah, it's I think no one's perfect, and we're all, for me, I'm a still work in progress, but I'm trying for her, because I love her, and I want to be a good mom to her, the best that I can.
And what I love that you're sharing, though, is this is work, and I'm so glad I'm doing this. Look what I can find. I can see the gift in my daughter, versus now she's an adult and you're like, oh, you know what? Now let's try to connect. You are being able to, even if you take 3 steps back, you are present to repair it and move on. And it's such a gift. And, I find myself, as a parent, really, some moments I will do all the things with intention, Rosa. Let's say if we take a Saturday, Saturday is a long day. That is the whole day of finding things to do, right? And we start off with these good intentions. First of all, we have museum passes in our home for 3 museums in LA. I never had a museum pass. I don't even think my parents took me to a museum. And I remember a moment, I was a step parent before I was a bio parent. And that was really a gift for me on so many ways to reparent myself. And a las fuerzas with step parenting. But I remember my partner then, who's now my husband, he was taking his son back then, 7 years ago, to the LA County Natural History Museum where the dinosaur bones are. And I was I couldn't go. I had to work. And they went. I was really upset, Rosa. I was like, how could you go? And he just thought I'll take you back. We'll go again. You know what? In fact, I got us passes. I was like, no, I don't want to go again. Even thinking about it now, I get upset. And he was like, I don't understand. And I didn't really understand what it was either, because we did things all the time on the weekends. What was different? And I realized later, I have never been to a museum with my parents. That was something I only did on a field trip at school, or once I traveled as an adult, I would find my own museums. But who does that with their kids? Who really does that? So when he did that, it was showing me a place, a wound that I was like, no, you don't get to do that with your kid, because I don't get to do that. And when I started to see that ugliness in me, I could have really gone in that direction of because that doesn't feel good. It's really a place of shame. I could have gone there, and I did sometimes, but really finding where is this coming from is oh, that was so beautiful of you. And it really made me see what I lack. Now I got 3 sons, and we go to the museum all the time. We have 3 passes, and it's part of our daily life. My kids will never know the wound I had, but it really took that reckoning of but once we can bring our kid in. So I go to say, at the end of all this, let's say it's a Saturday. We go to the museum. I get them the food they want. We drive home, and then we all get to rest, and we all get, they get to play their video games. They get to watch their shows. Let's say at the end of the day, I'm tired and I end up not being rude to them. I will guilt myself, or I used to at least a lot more, guilt myself all night. My husband would be like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I yelled at them. And he's like, but you were amazing all day. And I was like, it doesn't matter. I would throw everything to the fire and be like, I'm not worthy. Who do I think I am? And what I realized is I kept thinking the minute I yelled, the minute I was rude, it was exactly like my childhood. I would picture myself exactly in the same scenario, and I might as well have just not done anything all day. And I realized I had to stop myself and be like, that's not true. You are not back there. This is just one thing. You apologize, and then you just start over the next day. And that took a lot of time.
Yeah, no, it's so hard, and I think I think a lot of parents can relate to what you just shared. How often we beat ourselves up over one thing that we said or did that we think, oh, now, am I creating the same wounds, or am I wounding my child because I yell, so we are so hard on ourselves. And I do that, especially with guilt. For me, the guilt comes through with time. I always feel like I don't spend enough time with her. And my husband is the one that says, what do you mean? You were with her all day. You went here with her. You took her there. You guys, and I was like, yeah, but we didn't do floor play or, whatever it is today. Cause we were and so he kind of keeps me in check about like, what are you talking about? But yeah, I think, I don't want to say moms, just parents in general. I think we're very hard on ourselves because, I think we're all just trying to do the best that we can.
And I also have really learned a lot about letting go of control, leaning into uncertainty. And my next question actually has that. I've learned that the best thing I could do is to model the values that I want to embody. And maybe in my home, they start to pick it up. And then I'm like, oh, they're talking like I noticed in the pandemic specifically, I was like, I need to talk softer. I need to talk in a way that I like. For example, when my son was a baby, he was like 2, which is a baby in my eyes, right? I saw him do this and tell me to stop. And he was like gritting his teeth. And I was like, that se ve feo. Like, why are you doing that? And I was like, I do that. And just seeing a baby do it was like, oh, it's so not polite. So I started to become more intentional about how I talk, how I show up, how I like let my body posture. And I started to notice that my kids were doing better. They were speaking softer. They were more cariñoso with each other. And I was like, oh, how I show up really has a big impact, right?
Absolutely.
And I've seen it with my husband as well. And I wanted to ask you, with your partner or with your relationships at home, your siblings, that you said that you would do meditation with your sister, have you seen your own inner child work impact your family for the better? Have they become more vulnerable with you? Have you felt like your relationships, they've like really picked up on some of the work you do?
That's a hard question to answer, just because let me see. I wouldn't say it's gotten better, but on my end, I've set better boundaries with them. So, my family, I come from a big family. It was a lot of us, and, with my parents. And, so I've had to set boundaries in order to be able to continue a relationship with certain siblings, or even with my parents. So we do my own inner child work, my own trauma work, my own reparenting journey, all of that has helped me to set these boundaries with them. With one of my siblings, I directly said, if you do not respect me through your words, then we're not going to have a relationship. You need to be respectful to me, so I had to set those boundaries with my siblings. So I think that I don't know their healing journey, or if they're intentional about that. It's a lot of us, so I don't know how they're doing with that. But I can tell you that because I've done my work and I'm on my journey, I've been able to set those boundaries. So our relationships have improved. So I have a better relationship with my siblings. I have a better relationship with my parents. It's a relationship where respect, because that's what I expect. I expect them to respect me, my family. They don't need to agree with what I do, and I don't need to agree with what they do or how they parent their children, or how they are. But I've established those boundaries with these people in my life, my family, and with other people that extended family too, tias, tios, how all of that can really impact you, right? When your tia says certain things, and then you hear it, and it's like, oh, no, like you can't talk about my family, you can't talk about how I am, or my whatever it is that you think I'm doing wrong. So to answer your question, I don't know if they've been personally benefited in their own healing journey, but our relationships have improved because now there's very solid, good boundaries in place. And I think that has helped us out tremendously. Yeah.
Beautiful. And it sounds like even if something comes up, like you are in control of yourself. So, I heard a client tell me this really great quote with, how we used to say, like, aquí no pasa nada. It's almost like con ti, aquí no pasa nada. Like, it doesn't matter if someone wasn't okay with it. Within me, like, I'm good. And I think that is a really beautiful thing with inner child work. When I notice, like, I'm not as reactive, I'm not like, seeing red, I can be like, okay, I get that. And I also think of it like you had mentioned how you would find things come up, a lot of times when you're parenting and you're like, I thought I was over this. I thought I was through this. And I like to tell my clients, because I see it for myself too, like a spiral staircase. We can have something that we thought we were over, and then years later, our awareness has expanded. We can see more that we didn't know about ourselves, our wounds, our parts, and other people. And then we're like, why am I still here? And I feel like there's a lesson still to be shown of that. And sometimes I'll be like, oh, I'm over that. And then the next go around, I realize, oh, remember when my wounded inner child did that? And I see the awareness in a completely different way. And what I love about this work is the accountability it can show me as well. And so I'll be like, oh, and I kind of feel like if you're also not cringing at some of the things you've done in the past, you're also not expanding your awareness. Would you say there's some truth to that?
Yeah, because we're growing, right? We're always evolving and growing. And I'm sure I'm going to look back at this time in my life and realize, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I behaved that way with such and such person. I think we're always on that path of expansion and growth, as we should be, right? Especially when we're intentional about our healing journey and we're incorporating like inner child work. We're only moving forward. So inevitably, right, we're going to look back and, yeah, like you said, we cringe at certain things that I can't believe I said that, or I can't believe whatever it may be. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good thing. It means we're growing.
Yeah. And I love that you said, like, we're always going more, we're always growing. We're not going back. Even if we dip into our inner child, we have awareness of what they need. So we're always going to get more awareness the more we invite it. Beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that, I always tell people that even if we can have a relapse, especially when we're working through trauma, we may have things that trigger us, but our healing never goes back. We are able to bounce back a lot sooner, a lot faster than prior to starting our healing journey. So healing is always moving forward. We may fall off the horse, but we can always get back on. And I think that concept becomes easier and more accessible the more work we do for ourselves.
Yes, I love that message. Yes, that's so important. It's that and okay, showing up authentically really helped me step out of, I have an idea, and into rooted in reflection. Because, when I would fall back, when I would get snippy with my partner, when I would, fall out of line with my values, I'd be like, well, who are you to be a therapist promoting inner child work when you're not perfect? And then I was like, I'm going to promote it authentically and really show that, this is a part of it, and that's okay. And that's when I really felt like, oh, that is how we have self-compassion, is loving ourselves, giving ourselves grace in all of it, and knowing I'm going to get past this moment. And it's here to teach me a lesson. So I love that. Yes. Yeah. It's not about just being stuck in
honestly, being a therapist and going through your own healing journey. I remember when I started doing therapy, I would get therapists as clients sometimes, and they were the hardest, most difficult therapists. We are very difficult clients because we get in our own way. right? Because we have this cognitive or mental set of skills and information, and it is sometimes we're not able to see, or we have these blinders on, on a lot of things that we don't realize. We're very good at pointing it out in others, but it's very hard sometimes to see it or to acknowledge it or even recognize it within ourselves. So I honestly, whenever I had a therapist client, I always knew, okay, this is going to be even more of a challenge than someone that does not have a background in therapy or psychotherapy. I don't know what,
Yeah,
have you
I
noticed
remember
that
well, yes, when I started therapy, oh God, thank God. I have done therapy off and on, and, it's hard to find a consistent therapist. I found a really great therapist in 2018, 19 to talk about my workplace burnout, which I didn't really even want to address. I realize now I was so mean to myself, Rosa. It was like the minute I sat on her couch crying, just like, I shouldn't feel like this. You're going to think I'm a bad clinician. You're going to talk
yeah.
about me later. Like, you're going to think, oh my gosh,
Mm-hmm.
she sees people. Like, I'm going to tell everybody that she's
Yeah.
irresponsible. She's a hot mess. She doesn't like herself. And
Yes.
it was all this. And really, every time I saw her, she just held me in this, like, wow, you're being hard to yourself. She would really just poke at how unkind I was to myself and then give me kindness. And I was like, what are you doing? And I find myself doing that too when I work with therapists. I just really want to give them cariño because I know, a lot of times we are drawn to this work because we've been the helpers in our family. So it's easy for us to disassociate and be like, let me focus on them so that I don't have to do my own
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And so when it's time for it to be our space, I would always be like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm emotional. I'm so sorry. I
Yeah.
talked the whole
Yeah.
session. Like anytime I took
Yes.
up space, I would apologize.
Yeah, I can.
It's
Yeah,
hard.
everything you just shared. I went through that, and that in and of itself sometimes is the first obstacle, right, to overcome in therapy is to be able to just release the shame of needing help ourselves as mental health therapists.
Yeah. And, inner child work actually really helped me value my work and value my softness. I worked in medical social work for so many years that it was like, it's this hierarchy. Surgeons and doctors are up here, and then there's nurses, and then there's mental health professionals. And I know that people value us, but on the day to day, or when we talk about profits, we're not thinking about mental health. Maybe now we are, but I know that we were
Mm-hmm.
at the bottom, and sometimes I
Yeah.
would feel really like inadequate. And a colleague of mine one day really helped me. They were like, Cynthia, we provide a compassionate presence. That's what we did today. And I was like, but what does that mean? Like, they were like, this person expired and their family was in the room. And there was not really any medical intervention we could do. And yet we were the compassionate presence. And they will remember that. We helped walk them through their arrangements. We helped them talk to family members. And she's like, they will remember that presence instead of, having to fight someone or having to feel shamed or alone. And I was like, there is so much value in that. But being a medical social worker really helped me value compassion as a really big tool, as a really big place to meet someone. And it really helps people like get their guard off. It actually brings me to my next part. I wrote about my first impression with you. When I was on your podcast, I was listening back, Rosa. And right when you started talking, I felt like my body softened. I'm a very like boisterous person. They would always say I was hyper. But when I was on your podcast, I felt like your tone, your softness brought me to where you're at in this very calm place. And I really loved your voice, your tone. It feels very safe. And then you shared with me after the podcast that you actually started your podcast to challenge yourself because you weren't in love with the sound of your voice. And so you did it to really throw yourself into it. Can you tell me a little bit about that and what you discovered about yourself in that?
Yeah, yeah. That's so funny. Yeah, I do remember sharing that with you. I So let me, so to give you a little bit of a background story. So when growing up, or my teen years, mostly in the early 20s, I used to sing. I used to sing with a group. I used to sing
Oh,
in a choir, and, I love singing. But then I had this I mentioned this toxic relationship,
right.
right? And one of the wounds one of the lasting wounds from this relationship was that I stopped singing during that time, during that time.
Mm.
I haven't really, and by singing, I mean, with a group and in practicing and, being involved in that space. I completely stopped that. And, and I have, and honestly, I don't have a desire now to do that. However, I've always felt that there was something about using my voice or reconnecting with my voice that was very much needed for my healing. So I would say right before I got pregnant, maybe about 4 years ago or 5 years ago, maybe, my friend knew someone that was offering voice lessons, and I, very affordable in her home, and which was like 10 minutes from my house. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to do it. I need to reconnect with my voice, and I need to heal this wound that is very much, I know where it's coming from, right? I used to love singing, and I used to be, I used to sing in front of people and with my friends, and I started a group with my friends, a singing group with my friends, and used to practice, and I enjoyed that so much.
Yeah.
I was thinking, like, I think this is a part that's missing. So I started taking voice lessons again, and just kind of going through that. And that was very, very helpful. And I realized, okay, this was good. This was helpful, but it wasn't it. Like, I was like, there's something else. So then I started, I think I started playing with like karaoke at home and just having fun. And I started, I got my own thing at home for that. And it's just, so it's been like a natural progression. And then when the idea of podcasting, well, before that, I should say, then it was Instagram videos or Instagram lives.
Okay.
And then I would replay the videos, and it was like so cringy to me. And I was like, okay, so there's definitely something here that is still pending, that there's a wound that still needs to be looked at, right? There's something about my voice, literally, that makes me cringe. And I wasn't even singing. I was just talking. And so then when I decided to do the podcast, I was very intentional about, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to listen to myself, and I'm going to listen to my imperfect speech and imperfect words and sentence construction, whatever it is. And I'm going to sit through that discomfort, and I'm going to listen to the episodes and connect with people. And so it's been a little over a year since I've been doing the podcast, and actively in doing podcasts, and it's been very, very healing. I think this, I don't know what's going to come next in regards to that particular journey that I'm on, but at this point, I've noticed that I'm able to tolerate the discomfort of listening to my voice, replaying my episodes, just listening to myself. It's getting easier. It hasn't completely gone away. And I think maybe some of that is just normal. I think so many people just feel like that listening to themselves. But for me, it was a little bit more because of the history that I had. So I've noticed that it has helped me tremendously to be able to reframe some of these wounds that stem from this part of myself, which was, many, many years ago, but very much still coming through. And as a therapist, I like to see it as a part. There's definitely a part within me that used to show up whenever I would sing with my friends growing up. And that part kept coming up, and in one way or another. And I feel that now as an adult, that part, I don't see myself forming a girls group, at this point, but that part still wants to be seen and wants to be validated. And I think that podcasting has given that part within me, that very young part within me, a platform to be validated, to be seen, to be acknowledged, and with the added benefit of being of service being of service to others, sharing the message of healing and amplifying the voices of other people doing the healing work. So yeah, so it's been a journey that's been very, very healing for myself. So yeah. So
Beautiful.
thank you for
Healing for
asking that
yourself. And like you
question. Yeah.
said, yeah, healing others. And it sounds like you created in this podcast a place to practice self-compassion and curiosity. And then in
Yes.
that, you got to like meet people. You had a lot of great guests on. I would be like, oh my gosh. And you
Thank
inspire.
you.
I really feel like we're in a cutting edge time in mental health. And as clinicians, we have a chance to really do things differently. And I feel like you're a pioneer in that, where podcasting and mental health, there's not a lot of people doing it. And so you inspired me to be like, yeah, there's so many messages in your podcast that we're like, where else are we going to hear these things unless we tune in and make the space? And so you really took something that was personal to you and you provided it for a place for yourself, and then you share it with us. So it's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's not a lot of people in mental health or therapists in general, but also people of color, right? As a Latina, Mexicana, Chicana, for me, it's really important to share this message, to represent, and because it matters, right? I know it's a cliche now that we use this phrase, but it really, really does matter who we see on, whether it's on TV shows, what in music now, and now podcasting. I think it really makes a difference when you can relate to someone in many different ways, including someone that looks like you or that has that background that you can relate to.
Yeah, I think our inner child feels safe and they're like, okay, what's up? Yes, definitely. Okay,
Yeah.
and I have a question about our inner child. What has it been like to give your inner child loving kindness? What is their favorite way to receive it? Is it an action? Is it joy? Is it rest? Is it words? What is it like for them? How do you give them loving kindness?
Okay, so I'm going to say for the last couple of weeks, I've been not feeling guilty about watching a show, shows on Netflix, because for a long time, if I had any downtime, I would find other things to do. So in the last couple of weeks, I've been very intentional to find a show, because my husband and I, we love movies. We love shows. My husband's a big movie buff, and we just love looking, being immersed in that. But I've been feeling very guilty because that I'm wasting time on that when I could be doing X, Y, and Z. So the last couple of weeks, I just said to myself, I'm going to watch 45 minutes of a show that I've been meaning to watch for so long. And I'm going to sit and notice the guilt and just softly work through it and get back on my show, and it's been a challenge. I've been trying to do that for the last 2 weeks. The last 2 days, I finally last night and the night before, I sat with my husband and we caught up on our show. And yesterday I noticed I was so giddy watching the show because it's a really funny show. And I was like, oh my God. And he was even like, you're in a good mood. I was like, finally not feeling guilty that I'm enjoying a show. I don't feel guilty. I don't feel like I should be doing something else.
Yeah.
Like
I could see how it was probably working up to it, where you
silly show
finally didn't feel. Yeah. What show was it, man?
It's Married at First Sight.
Oh my gosh,
it's on.
Yeah,
Married at First Sight. It's a reality show.
Nonsense shows as well. I love reality shows to just escape. Right?
Oh my God,
I don't want anything serious.
Yeah, so this one, Bravo is like. It's like our guilty at night when we just don't really want to think through anything and just want to, disconnect. We have a couple shows on Bravo, but this one's not on Bravo. I forget where it's from, but we've been recording or saving episodes, and we're finally like, okay, let's just watch it. It's silly, it's funny, whatever. Have drama, but yeah. So finally, after the last 2 days, I've finally been able to enjoy that. So that's how I've been giving myself or my inner child that joy of just being okay with watching something on TV. I mean, if you think back to your childhood, I know, well, at least I shouldn't say, maybe not everyone, but I grew up with a mom that was so against television. Like, she thought television was the devil. So we weren't allowed to watch a lot of TV growing up. You know, we could only watch certain things at certain times on certain days, you know, so, which I understand now as a mom, right? Not everything is out there is appropriate, but my mom was a little extreme. So for me, that comes through, right? So being able to allow myself the joy of just enjoying a show for the sake of enjoyment, not because it's going to do anything for me, has been very, very helpful and very healing for my inner niña.
I love it. Yeah, thank you. And I see it. I found myself the similar thing. Children love watching movies, just resting, right? Having snacks. And I remember TGIF when I was a kid. TGIF, that turned, thank goodness it's Friday. There was like the shows that you knew you were going to watch. Maybe you could have a friend over. Maybe you got to go to a sleepover, but TGIF, and like your body knows, like, it's TGIF. Like, I can relax now. And I started implementing TGIF for my kids. Like, on Fridays, it's going to be TGIF, and I will make myself not be critical, let them have their fun. They like to have a bowl of popcorn. And so another thing I started adding into how to ground myself is mindfulness through my children. I just remember as a child, always my parents would buy me the junk food, and then they would criticize me for eating the junk food. And they would say things like, you know, te vas a poner gorda, ya estás gorda, ya, you know, and then I would just love the popcorn. And so now I find myself purposely, kind of how you said, sitting with the guilt and just observing it. I do that with mindfulness with my kids. I will, let's say they're eating popcorn. I will make myself sit there and mindfully watch them eat popcorn with loving eyes, with loving kindness. And I kind of just let my inner child say, you used to love having a snack in front of the TV, getting that crunchy little salty, buttery snack, wiping your greasy little hands on your pants, because who cares? It's Friday. You know, you're watching a movie. Your mom is like letting you be yourself. When I can do that, Rosa, and just watch my son, I remember one day he was eating a grilled cheese that I made him. And I just sat there for 10 minutes and he's watching his shows, eating his grilled cheese. And I observed what thoughts were in my head if it was me, you know, like, and I refrained from saying anything negative. And in that moment, I remember starting from a place of like, don't say this, Cynthia, too. Look how beautiful he is. He's crunching it. He's so happy. His lips are all greasy. Then at the end of the meal, he was like humming. And there he is, just having a TGIF. So I get like that too. I want to observe moments that I used to be shamed and let them relive it and just observe their joy. And then part of me goes, Cynthia, you were just as beautiful doing that. Does that feel good? Like, there was nothing wrong with you when you enjoyed food or when you enjoyed a TGIF. So I love that we're doing it in different ways, and the like profoundness of it.
Right. Healing. I like to tell my clients that is what healing in action looks like, because healing doesn't just happen in the therapy room, right? We do our work here, but when you go out, which is 80% of the healing work, right, is integrating this in, like you said, in that moment, being able to catch yourself with these thoughts and just looking at your son. That is how you're integrating healing into your everyday life. And that is the key. You know, that's how you know you're moving along and you're actually on this healing journey. You're moving forward, you're expanding, is because you're able to have these moments.
The feeling sometimes of this peace, Rosa, of this integration is so beautiful and profound. Sometimes it's overwhelming. Would you agree? Like, sometimes I'm like, I didn't know it would feel this good. I didn't know it was possible. And I also feel the more I'm integrated with my inner niña and inner teenager and inner señora, my heart is like so expansive. Like, even now, everything gives me goosebumps when I'm like connecting with someone. It's just like this open place that used to be like a wound. It's now like this open, observation deck, and I'm just
Yeah.
really open to connecting and compassion. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
beautiful. Absolutely.
beautiful. Yeah. So it brings me to my final questions, just to kind of wrap up everything. I see you, and I see you just in the work you've been doing in this year, from inner child healing to your wise senora and your inner ancestor. And I want to ask you, we haven't talked about ancestor healing, but how do you, with all of this work you've been doing, personal life, work, your artistic crafts, how do you want to be remembered as an ancestor? When your daughter says, "Oh my gosh, your bisabuela, wow, this is what she was like." How do you want to be remembered? What words do you hope that they remember you by?
Yeah. I definitely want to be remembered as someone that was kind and loving and generous to those around me, around, those that I love. I want them to remember how it felt to be in my presence, how it felt to experience my kindness towards them, my love towards them. Even when I think about my daughter, how sometimes, you daydream about how it's going to be when, she's older and
Yeah.
I'm old, and what's going to be like. I always want her to know my mom was so kind to me, and she was loving and not perfect, but loving and kind and generous. So yeah, I think that's what comes
That's
to mind
beautiful.
right now. Yeah.
I can feel it when you say it. So it's
Oh,
coming through in
thank
like
you.
your intention. So it's beautiful. I can only imagine, really how your daughter receives it, or even how she has seen you develop. Yeah, it's
Oh,
beautiful.
thank
Thank
you.
you. And then I have one, if you can offer some tips. We talked about this. I love that you covered this, because I think people need to know that we go through this every day. Like, I feel like I find myself
Mm-hmm.
regrounding, especially in this dark
Mm-hmm.
world right now. A lot of uncertainty.
Yes.
A lot of people have job uncertainty, financial uncertainty, relationship uncertainty. And I remember one day I was having a great couple months, Rosa. I was like killing it. My business was growing. And then it was like crickets. And I found myself like flailing. I always picture it like when I'm like not handling it, I feel like Alice in Wonderland falling in the hole, like, and it's hard for me to get myself back. And my husband's like, "What's wrong? You've been doing so well." And I was like, "I think I lost it. Like, that's it. I'm not doing well today. I can't get back on." And he's like, "You always have those tools. Maybe you just need to rest." And I was like, maybe he's onto it. So it really started me thinking about what my ritual is. And I want to ask, for people at home who are feeling like this is a week where they fell off, what do you offer? Like, what do you do for yourself? Through what kind of rituals, or what things do you're like, I know I got to get back to it. That's it. What can you do to reground yourself after falling off your routine? What's your ritual look like?
Yeah, so it would be going on a long walk with my dogs, alone with my dogs. Yeah, I'm talking about a week, like you said, where I just need to regroup, reground. And so, yeah, definitely, I need to make sure I prioritize sleep. And more often than not, if I'm having a week like that, I have not been sleeping well. So I make sure that I go to bed by a certain time. I go on a walk. I make time to meditate. But primarily, I would say rest, literally sleep, walk, and I make sure that I eat something that I find delicious and nourishing, whether that eating somewhere, going somewhere to eat, or making something, or asking my husband to make something. My husband, he's the cook at home. So I ask,
Nice.
so he, so I make sure that I'm eating well, drinking water. This particular, like talking about just this week, I also started taking some vitamins again that I had stopped. I used to be really good at taking vitamins and all these different things. And I started realizing I'm not taking anything right now. So for me, this particular week, it was just going back to and figuring out what supplement can I take, contacting certain people that are very good at this and can give me some advice. And I ordered a bunch of stuff, and I got it yesterday actually. So today I started taking that, and so little things like that. But for me, it's always through the body. It's always through movement and rest and alone time. That's because I'm an introvert by, I mean, just by nature, I'm an introvert. So it takes a lot of energy for me to be out and about or meeting people, talking to people, working, whatever it is. It takes so much energy and so much recovery. So if I don't take care of myself by being intentionally alone, it takes a toll. So for me, all of that helps to recover. And usually, honestly, if I do that, if I give myself a day or two of that, like just resting, eating well, drinking water, walking, being alone for at least a few hours, with a baby, I don't have the luxury of being alone for days, but even if it's just a couple of hours where I can just be at home and read, that I'm good to go. Like after 2 or 3 days, like I actually, it doesn't take that long, but again, it's about making the space for that and being intentional about it and just doing it, right? Just not feeling guilty.
Right.
That
I hear you.
Time to yourself. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I can see it in just how you describe it as you mothering yourself through your inner mother, just being like, hey, we're going to take a couple days. It's going to be okay.
Absolutely.
And I think when I've done that, when I can say, instead of, why aren't you over this yet? This happened yesterday. This argument was 2 days ago. Instead of doing that, saying, hey, let's see how you feel in 3 days. It's only been a day. And instead of like making myself be over something, saying, hey, how can we feel these days? And let's see how you feel. And if I'm still not over it, it might be something that really, really impacted me, but at least giving myself that softness, and it's easier to bounce back. Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Rosa. Thank you so much for being with us and really being vulnerable, bringing your authentic self. Yeah. Yes, and please let listeners know where we can find you, where we can find more of your work, and where we can listen to you.
Yeah. So I have a podcast. It's called the Inner Healing Paths Podcast. Cynthia's been on it. I think you're towards the top of one of my last guests, I think. So yeah. So, people can find our interview and other folks talking about trauma and healing. I'm very active on Instagram. I have all the links there to all the other services that I offer. So my Instagram account is Rosa Shetty, just the way my name's is spelled. I know there's a couple of scammers out there using my account, offering whatever reading that, I don't do any of that. My account is just my name, no funky spelling or dots or anything. So you can find me on Instagram and on my podcast.
Great. Thank you so much, Rosa. And I wish you the best. Thank you so much. And
thank you.
I hope you all tune in to her podcast and start following her because she's wonderful. Have a great evening.